Recalling his earliest memories, retired Archmage Rexak Zygar shares a story about his youth growing up in New Yothar and learning magic. I was running through the market on my way to fetch some salt from my mother. She had given me a full silver and told me to spend the extra on something for myself as thanks for helping out with the chore. I remember thinking about all the rock candy I was going to buy. Of course, I never made it to the candy store that day. As usual, I was running far too quickly through the market. On this day, I was distracted by a horse rearing up from the fruit cart it was carrying and causing oranges and apples, limes and lemons to scatter randomly into the dusty road in front of the fruit stand, and ensuing yelling by the man angrily telling the driver to keep the animal under control. Not paying attention to where I was going, and still moving along at quite a clip, I, of course, tripped over a rock and landed right on top of the fancy bronze-buckled black leather boots of a local magician performer. A rough, calloused hand reached down to offer me an assist. I accepted the hand and dusted off my pants as I glanced up to my benefactor. I was greeted by the face of a friendly old half-orc with a broken left tusk, a shock of white hair styled in the Vostok orc warrior style, and a shockingly brick-red robe with worn-through gold embroidery that at one point must have been really impressive flames. Ah, good old Raka. He was an old half-orc illusionist who was still wowing and amazing audiences well into his 80s, if I remember right. Our paths would cross in the days to come. Each day I would wander through the market on my way to get salt from my mother, and each day Raka would teach me a little something about magic. He was, of course, an illusionist, and had a penchant for real and illusory fire magic. But the first real spell he taught me was shield, and I fell in love with it. I once shielded myself from my mom's spaghetti sauce when the dog got a wild hair and decided it was a good idea to try to take the sauce down for himself. The dog, the kitchen, my mom, everything was covered in sauce, except me with my last-minute shield spell. Oh, my mom was furious at me for staying clean. She chased me up the stairs and threatened to give me a big, sloppy, spaghetti-enhanced hug. Unfortunately, I have always been awful at charms, so in an attempt to get out of trouble with a charm spell, I only ended up on dish duty for a week. But back to Raka. As thanks for the lessons, I would run a little errand for him to go fetch components or other things. Looking back at it, I think these errands were important lessons as well. It felt like it was important to Raka that I learn how to interact with people, just as important as it was that I learned the intricacies of magic. I remember the week that Raka was trying to help me better understand illusions, how they weren't just a school of magic, but pulled lessons from every school of magic due to their nature. He would often claim, "Rex, my young apprentice, if a wizard can master illusion, he can master any school." I owe a lot to my core understanding of magic to this street mage, and once I became Archmage of the school, I implemented the Apprentice to Wizard program for our students, giving each student an opportunity to learn from a real world professional wizard as they went through the University Arcanum's curriculum. I believe in a wide and varied approach to learning magic, as our students learn magic in many different ways, more effectively. I remember one such incident where I was learning from Raka, in which I was asked to fetch a finger bone from a fairly shady necromancer who happened to be a casino owner. It was his whole theme: dancing, burlesque ghouls, zombie waiters decked out in pinstripe suits, skeletal blackjack dealers, and mummy roulette, where the mummies would literally take one eye out of their socket to use as a roulette marble. There was even a few vampire lawyers and wraith accountants and a team of revenants providing security. I was not excited about running this errand. As I walked the floor towards the office of Phineas Valcook, owner and operator of the Titans Table and the city's most respected newspaper, the New Yothar Journal. As I walked into Phineas' office, decorated in a modern but almost steampunk style, I was greeted by a strange coalescence of a mad scientist laboratory, a business office, and a well-curated museum focusing on the undead. As I had entered into the office unannounced, I was greeted by a startled Phineas, who immediately jumped behind his desk in a flash of purple smoke, and before I could think, had grabbed his wand and launched a crackling, putrescent bolt of necromantic green lightning surging in my direction. I don't remember all of the magic that happened in the next moment, but somehow I managed to put up a shield that so succinctly matching the opposite energies of the spell that it reflected it back on Phineas and blasted a hole in his desk the size of a small horse, leaving it a pile of melted, burning wood covered in necro slime and poisonous vapors. Sorry about that. I've been a bit on edge lately. Nice shield spell, by the way. Excellent form, and, if I might add, a far stronger shield spell than most wizards I've ever worked with could produce. What is your catalyst, if I may ask? I could potentially write a book just on the very premise of your shield spell. Was that a Veldekian substructure you used in crafting the spell? Isn't that an illusion framework? Did you also add an ancient Egyptian incantation into the spell's vocal component? Seeming to come back to the present. Sorry about nearly blasting you, by the way. Death threats and all. He taps his chin thoughtfully. One can never be too careful. Since you aren't a dead mass of smoking and melting flesh right now, I suppose I should ask you why you're here. It was that day that I earned the respect and notice of one of the most powerful necromancers I would ever meet. Fascinatingly well-read wizard. I think he decided to embrace becoming a lich a few decades back. We never really kept up after I became Archmage. I think Phineas was a bit jealous and had aspirations of making Archmage himself one day. It was my 3rd year as Rocca's apprentice. As Rocca was a traveling wizard, I was invited to join him on his tour. As there was no tutor in the city who would offer to continue my magical education for the mere price of a few random errands, my mother agreed to put me in his care for the summer and sent me out in the world at the age of 13. Unfortunately, on our first voyage outside the city of New Yothar, we were only a few miles down the road before we were set upon by bandits. My mentor quickly shoved a bit of parchment into my hand and told me to fetch the chest for these young gentlemen, Rex. The torn bit of parchment read, Take the invisibility potion and run. I looked at my mentor and nodded, accepting that he probably had a plan and needed me out of harm's way. His fire magic being a bit, shall we say, less than controlled. I last saw the half-orc as he was conjuring up and riding a fire elemental that had somehow taken the shape of a vortex of flame. They found Rocca's body 3 years later, charred and dead, but with a big smile on his face. I can only imagine the terrified screams of those bandits, and I would easily give a full barrel of Devonary's spiced gin to have seen that battle as it ensued. I'm sure old Rocca must have given those bandits quite a scare.